Hello, everybody coming in. We're just going to wait about 30 seconds to let everyone filter in and get logged in for this great webinar. All right. Well, my name is Carly. I'm here on the Motivosity team, and I'm happy to soon to be turning the time over to Dr. Bobby Lowe. He is our head of people science here at Motivosity. This webinar is fantastic, full of amazing knowledge, research, and takeaways that you can all take to your team. So thank you all for joining us today for this webinar, Motivational Psychology, the keys to retaining your employees. With that, I'm going to just dive in and turn the time over to Dr. Bobby Lowe.
Carly, it is really awesome to be here and be with everybody just to talk through what is really one of my favorite topics to talk about, and that is everything that has to do with motivational psychology. What are the things that move us? What are the behaviors? What are the things that inspire us to be our very best selves? Just to dive in and give you a little bit about my background, I'm a psychologist. I fell in love with psychology really through my sport experience. I was a pole vaulter. I ran track in high school, in college, and professionally for a couple of years. And my event was the pole vault. And really, I fell in love with psychology through my sport experience because I always, I loved watching sports, and I always looked at some of the best athletes, and I thought, man, they do something different that really helps them become better than those that are just athletic, right? They're thinking differently. They're really doing something different. And so I wanted to know what that was. So I went and started studying it, and I started meeting with psychologists, and I started really exploring what are all the pieces and what are all the elements that help people perform their best, right? That actually led me to then go and study this in the academic side, right? I graduated from college, and I went on to get a couple of graduate degrees. I finished my PhD and really tried to just study everything about performance psychology and everything about motivation and what inspires us, right? From there, I was actually able to take both my experience in the sport world and then what I had studied and parlay that into a research project that was a really great research project to be a part of. We got a chance at the University of Missouri to do a study with athletes that had won Olympic medals in the 2012 London Olympic Games, and we reached out to a whole bunch of athletes that had won medals. We interviewed them. We asked them about all of the different factors that contributed to them winning a medal. We went to their training. We got to observe them in their training environments. We also interviewed their coaches and really started to uncover, hey, what are some of the factors related to the relationship between a coach and an athlete that influence them winning an Olympic medal? And anyways, the whole study was awesome. We got a chance to interview 24 athletes that won medals in the Olympic Games, and then we got to sort of take all that research and use it to train other coaches that were preparing for the 2016 Olympic Games and consecutive games after that. But what I wanted to, the reason I tell you this story is really just to highlight, my experience and my experience with applying psychology principles to help me be a better athlete, going in and studying it in an academic setting, and then producing and publishing research that illustrates and demonstrates, that applying these psychology principles can lead to higher performance. We certainly found that in the sport world. It led to these athletes winning medals at the games. And actually, part of this presentation, I'm going to identify a few things that will help us in our work life, us in our organizations, lead to better performance as well. And so really all three of those experiences continues to lead me down this path to understand, to uncover what is it that motivates us? What is it that moves us? What are the behaviors? What are the experiences? What makes us happy at work, right? How do we become more fulfilled at work? So here at Motivosity, one of my jobs is really to take everything that is in the research world, everything that we know about motivation, about psychology, about leadership, about gratitude, and sort of pull in all the best science and then use that to inform the products and the technology that we build. And then another part of my job is to help our teams build those technologies so that when we share those with people, we actually know that the technology and the behaviors that we're prescribing actually work. They're actually motivating us, right? So as we're going to dive in today, I want to talk about two things, and then I'm going to talk about one behavior that will really, really change your culture and impact your culture, right? So, but in order to get to that point, we're going to do a crash course in Motivation 101, right? So everybody remembers, Psychology 101. I'm sure we can all name some of the, historical weird psychologists like Freud and Skinner and, some of the history there. But most of us probably forgot it, unless you're me, because I love psychology, and so I tried it as much as I could to remember it. But I'm gonna sort of illustrate here in about 3 or 4 minutes, just the theories of motivation and what are the big factors that motivate us and influence us, right? And then I'm going to talk about what happens in the brain. And then I'm going to talk about the one behavior that can really help change and motivate your teams and your people, right? So let's dive into this. The truth is, Motivation 101, it's messy. There's a lot of pieces. It's really complex. So I'm going to try and just, simplify it and bring it down, in an organized fashion here. So let's dive in. So I first want to highlight there are hundreds and hundreds of behaviors that are motivating behaviors that influence us every day. They nudge us in one direction or another direction. They could be as simple as, somebody inviting us to an activity or to a gathering. It could be something as simple as, money, how we use our money to spend on different things, right? It could be something as simple as, somebody smiling or waving at us, right? But anyways, there's hundreds and hundreds of these behaviors that nudge us and move us in little ways. And these little behaviors really build into what I'll call our 5 core motivators. So if you're a fan of positive psychology, if you're a fan of motivational theory, you'll recognize these. They come from self-determination theory and a lot of the research that Martin Seligman did on positive psychology. And so I kind of took the two and smashed them together. But these are the 5 core programmed inside of us motivational pursuits. And I'll go kind of left to right here and walk through them. But first, I want to just talk about autonomy, right? So it's programmed in us to want to have some control over our lives, over our environment. So what this looks like is making decisions about how we work, when we work, where to work from. There's some elements with the whole kind of industry shifting to either hybrid work models, work from home, work in office, or even work from home entirely. That helps promote some of the autonomy that folks crave. And really it is just a sense of having some control over what it is you do, being able to make your own choices there with how your work is done and where your work is done and those kinds of things, right? This breaks down anytime you sort of get a micromanager type relationship in there, because every time they micromanage, essentially, they're breaking an individual's autonomy, right? They're impeding on this motivational pursuit, right? The next one I want to talk about is mastery. Pretty much since the day we're born, we come into the world wanting to learn new things, right? We start with walking and talking, and then that graduates into, learning new hobbies, taking up interests, and then that graduates into career aspirations, right? And job skills. and we apply that into the corporate setting, into our work life, right? But all of us are motivated to want to learn new skills and even master those skills, right? This is something that we want to learn and want to be a part of our work experience. The third thing is a really, really critical piece, and this is just the relationship. So one of our core motivational pursuits is the desire to bond with other people and want to build strong, positive relationships with other people. In the workplace, this starts with your manager, and we know how important that relationship is. And then this extends into your peers that are on your same team, peers that are on different teams. And we're all programmed to want to develop those positive relationships in the workplace there. The next piece I'll talk about here just for a quick second is meaning. All of us have a motivational pursuit inside of us to want to contribute to something bigger than ourselves. This can be reflected in a couple of ways. This could be, if you're in the healthcare profession and you're a nurse or a clinician, and you're helping people recover from surgeries or injuries or get healthy, a lot of those healthcare providers find meaning in just that experience of helping other people, right? You could also find it for me here at Motivosity, because we're a company that builds technology to promote gratitude and connectedness and motivate employees. I feel like a kid in a candy store, because that's what I'm really passionate about, is everything that motivates people. And now we get to apply that to technology, right? For others, they find this meaning in sort of, it could be charitable activities, charitable donations, or contributing to underserved communities through donations or service projects or activities in that regard. That's how some folks find their meaning there. And then the last piece I'll highlight here is this desire to experience achievement. We love it when we achieve new things, when we accomplish tasks, when we achieve, when we win a game, or we learn a new skill or complete a project. That sense of that desire to want to experience that achievement is programmed in us, and it's really inspiring and motivating. All 5 of these factors are built in us. They're innate in us. Some more predominant than others, but for the most part, this is pretty universal. And then what that leads to is really 2 core experiences that I want to talk about. So the first experience is as we demonstrate these behaviors and we pursue these motivational pursuits, if we're checking all those boxes, we should experience a wealth of positive emotions: joy, satisfaction, contentment, you name it, anything that is sort of on that positive emotion spectrum, that we love experiencing that, and it's healthy to us, it's beneficial to us. And then the second piece is what I'll call engagement. The psychology world calls this flow, or the flow state, but really it's being challenged. It's the combination of being challenged and really, really focused on your work or in your job, right? So some of you may have experienced this when, if you're like me, it's whenever I'm in Excel and I'm crunching data and crunching numbers. I get really invested, really focused, and like 2 or 3 or sometimes 5 hours will just disappear, and I won't even know where that time went. And you sort of come back to consciousness, and you're like, wow, that was kind of a cool experience. So in the psychology world, they call that the flow state. In the workplace, that's what engagement is. It's really being fully invested in what your job is and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. That's a positive experience that we like to have. And then the last layer here is really just this optimal experience, right? Maslow calls this self-actualization, but essentially it's just this optimal experience. Are we having these behaviors that are sort of checking the boxes on these motivational pursuits, which is creating these positive experiences for us, which is opening the door for us to flourish, as you know, Martin Seligman calls it, the flourishing experience. So now that we've all had like a crash course in Motivation 101, I want to talk about really what happens in the brain when we experience these two things. One of my colleagues here at Motivosity, he describes this, you know, as I talk about the neuroscience of motivation, he simply just describes this as fireworks going off in your brain. But really at its simplest form, like that's what's happening. Your brain is just lighting up with all of these positive neurochemicals. Every time you achieve something, every time you experience, you know, a bonded relationship, every time you experience contributing to something bigger than yourself, right? Our brain just lights up. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. These are all the positive neurochemicals that flow through the brain. They create a really, really cool acronym that spells out the word dose. So I like to call this, you know, anytime you're checking those motivational boxes, you're getting a dose of happiness in the brain. So that's what happens in the brain when we're checking some of these boxes from a neuroscience standpoint. And so really, I want to sort of sum it up with this. Anytime we you know, achieve something or demonstrate a particular behavior, the neurochemicals in our brain sort of inspire us to want to do them again, right? This happens when we eat great food. This happens when our phone buzzes. This happens when we, you know, exercise. And most importantly, here in the workplace, this happens when we complete meaningful projects, right? And so, you know, at its simplest form, from an evolutionary context, the neurochemicals reward us for the behaviors demonstrated, and then they motivate us to want to repeat them, right? So now I'm going to dive in. I want to talk about the one behavior that can change your entire culture. And if you can't tell from my shirt, that behavior is the frequent and expression of gratitude. Gratitude is one of those behaviors that lights up our brain from a neuroscience standpoint. It checks a lot of the motivational boxes that I talked about in that Motivation 101 slide right there. And I'll show you here in a few more slides. I'll show you a little bit more evidence and some of the research that we've done here to help illustrate this, right? But first, I want to talk about essentially gratitude as a reinforcement. A lot of us are familiar with, you know, classical conditioning and operant conditioning and some of the positive reinforcements. But let me show you how gratitude, I just want to illustrate for a second how gratitude becomes one of those positive reinforcements, right? And I'm not just talking about, you know, a simple expression of thank you. I'm talking about a little bit deeper, a little bit more meaningful expressions of gratitude where you're really saying thank you to somebody for something. It could be a project completed, could be great teamwork, it could be any of those things, right? So the cycle sort of gets started by a project getting completed, right? So that's a catalyst that opens the door for gratitude to be expressed. And then as peers, as colleagues, as leaders, and as executives, as we come in and share gratitude when that project is completed or when that person demonstrated a behavior that we like them demonstrating, we reinforce that behavior with the gratitude. And then again, the dose hits the brain, right? The fireworks go off in the brain. And because we like those positive neurochemicals, we associate the positive benefits of the neurochemicals to the behavior that was demonstrated, and that inspires us to want to repeat the behavior, right? So you create this sort of cyclical behavior loop that conditions us to want to demonstrate, you know, great work and then repeat that demonstrated great work because we love the recognition, the appreciation, the gratitude that flows from that, right? So I just wanted to illustrate here how that gratitude sort of reinforces that. Now I'm going to show you some of the research that we've done here at Motivosity with some of our internal research team here to help sort of validate and share some of the data and some of the findings that we've had with you here. But first, I want to ask this question. So I want to ask the question, money. I want to ask if you agree with this statement. If you agree or disagree with the statement that money can't buy you happiness. So Carly's going to throw up a poll here. Some of you already see that there, but go ahead and just sort of enter in here. If you agree with this statement, if you disagree with this statement, if you're sort of in between sometimes, or if you have no opinion at all. We'll let that roll for a few more seconds here. Looks like about half of the folks so far have participated and contributed their responses here. All right, let's go ahead and dive through these results here. Carly, just quick, can people see these results? Okay, everybody can see these results. So I'm going to just sort of walk through them kind of one by one. It looks like there's a good amount, 21%, that agree with this statement that money can't buy you happiness. And then it looks like the rest of the group is pretty much in this I disagree, or it kind of depends, right? Sometimes. This group must be my country music fans. You guys must like Chris Jansen's song, Money Can't Buy You Happiness, but it can buy you a boat, it can buy you a truck, it can buy you all the fishing gear that goes along with what then creates experiences that generate happiness. There is some truth to that. But I wanted to ask this question mostly just to get a sense of where everybody's at. Because I want to share with you really a take that we have on it here at Motivosity. So money can't buy you happiness, but I sort of want to put a spin on that. If you think that money can't buy you happiness, then you might not be spending it right. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about some of the research we did here at Motivosity to show you how really spending money can motivate you or make you happy. It can buy you happiness, right? So let's dive in. So we did a study really over the last 5 years. It consisted of 250 organizations, about 100, just a little over 100,000 participants. And over that time, we asked people to do a task, and then we measured their satisfaction from that task, or their general satisfaction with their company over time. And we collected over 200,000 survey responses on a quarterly basis. So let me describe to you what we did. So we essentially through our platform and through our product, and some of you know this, but we essentially gave people $1. And we said, take this $1 and go say thank you. And in a lot of cases, we gave people $5 and said, hey, go say thank you. And if you say thank you within the month, or if you don't use the money, it'll expire at the end of the month, and then you'll get a new set of dollars to go say thank you. But the whole idea was to promote this behavior of giving people $1 and inviting them to say thank you and express meaningful gratitude. What's interesting is the task was really designed to say, hey, go say thank you. We use the $1 more as a nudge to just get them to say thank you and get more people to say thank you. And so here's what we found. As we asked people to do this, to go say thank you and express gratitude, like I said, we tracked satisfaction across 6 questions. Many of them are similar to, the questions that Gallup tracks, as they're measuring employee sentiment and employee satisfaction. And so let me share with you some of the results we found. As folks went and said thank you and expressed gratitude, we collected their employee satisfaction, and we saw we applied that to the EMPS model where you have sort of detractors and promoters, and then you minus the detractors from the promoters and you get a score, right? So anyways, we tracked that satisfaction over time, and we found that with the question, my manager cares, we saw 96% increase in satisfaction with the relationships with their managers. Additionally, and similar to developing strong relationships at work, we saw 106% increase in satisfaction with having a best friend at work or having friends at work, right? And then these other two I thought were really, really interesting. We saw 134% increase in satisfaction with people reporting that they're willing to stay at the company, right? So this is a really strong retention metric. This is a really strong indicator of, do people like your culture? Do they like what's happening? And are they willing to stay at your company and continue to work with you, right? So that's a really strong retention metric there. And then the other piece I love about this is we saw a 196% increase in the traditional EMPS question, which is, would you recommend your company to your peers and friends to work here, or would you promote your company, right? And we saw a pretty significant increase in satisfaction there. Really, in its simplest form, what is this saying? Well, it's saying that gratitude builds connectedness, right? The gratitude that gets expressed from a frequent and consistent basis is building strong relationships inside of an organization, right? It's creating meaningful relationships. It's creating loyalty and retention. It's causing people to say, hey, I'm willing to stay here because of the gratitude, because of the relationships. And then additionally, this last piece, right, it's essentially saying, hey, I want to invite everybody else to come and be a part of the party, to come work here, or to come be a customer here, or whatever it is, right? So stronger relationships, better retention, and better, I'll use the word evangelism, better evangelism for the company, right? Those are all benefits that we want to have inside of our organizations. And coincidentally, well, not coincidentally, but interestingly, this relationship, if you remember that Motivation 101 slide, developing that strong relationships is it's a programmed core motivational influence, right? We want to feel like we belong. We want to feel connected to our peers and our managers and others inside the organization, right? So I thought that the findings were really, really interesting and certainly demonstrate increases in satisfaction, right? So I want to ask this group this question. Hopefully everybody answers this question with the response A, but I want to ask the question: have you been recognized and or thanked by your boss in the last week? This is a common question that Gallup and other research firms use to measure. It's an element of employee satisfaction, right? Have you been recognized? Have you been thanked by a boss recently? We know that frequent and consistent recognition does inspire us. It does motivate us, right? And so I want to find out from this group. Now this question is pretty singular, and I'm only asking: has your boss have you been recognized or thanked by your boss in the last week? Now, I know a bunch of you on this call are probably bosses or managers or supervisors. The one thing I want to put a plug into your brain here is: have you recognized your team members in the last week, right? So simple, just as important as it is for our managers to recognize us, it's important for you to recognize your direct reports because they're thinking the same thing that this question is asking, right? So let's walk through the results here. Looks like most people have responded. A good almost 40% have yes, definitely have been recognized this week, right? But then there's a good 50% or 52% that have said, no, I have not been recognized this week. And then about 9-10% here, folks have said, I can't even remember the last time that I heard a thank you. Well, that's the good news is that's always the lowest. When we ask this question, that one comes in the lowest all the time. But unfortunately, it still gets some results, some people saying this. And actually here at Motivosity, that actually just breaks our heart, right? It breaks our heart, one, because we are all about gratitude. We're all about saying thank you. We're all about recognizing folks for the good work that they're doing. And so to hear people say, hey, I've never had this, that's heartbreaking. And then even if you are in the B camp too, right? We certainly we certainly can empathize as well there. Thank you for participating and sharing your thoughts here as we just explore, the importance of being recognized on a weekly basis. So as a researcher, I'm a nerd. I analyzed the data. I saw some of the increases in satisfaction, and then my next question, I immediately become a skeptic, and I start to think, okay, well, the data says that, but are we actually making people happier, right? So I start to crunch the numbers and devise another model to really measure if we're making people happier. And so what I wanted to look at is, because we measured satisfaction on a 1 to 10 scale, and I wanted to know, are we moving people over time as they're experiencing gratitude and giving and receiving gratitude? Are we moving them up this scale of satisfaction, right? So are we turning, a good example of this, are we turning people who rate a 5 into 7s, and are we turning 7s into 9s? And essentially, are we making people happier? If a 9 or a 10 is evidence of satisfaction, or really, really high satisfaction, we can assume that also is evidence of happiness too, right? And so I went and looked, and I said, how many people are we turning into 9s and 10s? And actually, we found some really fascinating results. In the first 6 months of this frequent and consistent expression of gratitude, we saw a 6 to 25% increase in satisfaction, increase in the amount of promoters, right? So yes, we're increasing satisfaction, but we saw an increase in people reporting 9s and 10s, right? So we were moving people up this satisfaction scale. Additionally, after 6 months, and for the life of that organization, as long as we measured them, we saw 25 to 75% increase in the amount of people reporting that they're happier, right? Turning people into 9s and 10s on that scale. And so again, fascinating results that show sort of the immediate impact. And it may not be massively large, but the immediate positive impact in the first 6 months, and then the additional impact that comes after 6 months in promoting and helping people be happier there. So from that, I want to sort of ask this question, because the data says, hey, the appreciations are important. The appreciations matter, right? I'm a little bit curious, because I'm a researcher, and I'm a little bit curious, which appreciations matter the most to you? So from this group, which appreciations matter the most? So as you go out, let's say appreciation is just flooding through your organization, and everybody's cheering each other on, and everybody's saying thank you, and you have peers from your same team, you have peers from a different team, you obviously have your supervisor or your direct manager, and then you have kind of the senior executive leadership team, right? CEO, COO, or any sort of VPs or EVPs, you name it. But which of those to you has the most meaningful impact? Which essentially is, when you receive one of these appreciations, which is the one that says, I'm going to go run through a wall for that person because of what they said and how meaningful that was, and where that came from, right? Okay, so it looks like the data's in. It looks like most folks have responded here, and it looks like the executive leadership team, so more than half of you said that is the most impactful or most meaningful appreciation. Then a manager was a little bit less. A peer from a different team was about 18%, and then a peer from your same team was about 11%. So from this group, we see that the executive level is kind of the most meaningful there, which actually, again, a little nudge. If you are an executive, and if you are on that senior leadership team, and you are one that sees this data, I hopefully that's encouraging you or prompting you to then go and say thank you, and say thank you more often to your team and to your people that are part of your team. Similarly, if you're a manager, right? But I kind of want to highlight a couple of this. Typically, your responses actually don't fall outside of what I normally see, and really, so I kind of want to describe that. the peer-to-peer, whether it's your same team or a different team, is really, really important. But because it happens often and probably most frequently, we tend to take it a little bit for granted. But I would say that still carries a significant amount of importance to us as we go throughout our day-to-day projects. These are the people we work the closest with, and so forth. What's really interesting about the manager and the executive response is typically when people respond here, and why this appreciation is the most meaningful, is this sends a really strong message to the employee that one, the leadership and the manager, they see you. Two, they care about you. And three, what you're doing is having an impact on the business, right? It's having an impact on whether it was a project completed or just driving the mission that the company is trying to drive. And so that's why those become more meaningful to us, is because it helps us connect to the impact that we're having on the business. And it's a good bonding relationship builder, right? It sends a message of we care about you, right? So thank you for participating, sharing your thoughts here. I want to share just a couple more data points here on gratitude, right? Especially as gratitude is connected to productivity in the workplace, right? Productivity increases by more than 50% when an employee receives a thank you from the supervisor. We can read a sentence like that and go, hey, that sounds interesting, but why does that happen? And so that's why I wanted to highlight, Motivation 101 and some of the neuroscience behind what happens, because when a supervisor says thank you, the fireworks go off in an individual's brain, and then they become really inspired to want to go and run through a wall for that person, right? So it means a lot. That's why productivity goes up, right? Additionally, 81% of people would work harder if for a grateful boss, for a boss that expressed more gratitude and appreciation. So interesting how many folks, 8 out of 10 folks said, hey, if I got more of this, I would work harder for it, right? So I sort of want to sum everything up here with this quote, with this phrase. I love Stephen M. R. Covey, great thought leader on trust and leadership, and former CEO of Franklin Covey, the consulting firm that does a lot of consulting on leadership, right? So, anyways, in his book, The Speed of Trust, he puts out this phrase and says, frequent and consistent rewards and recognition with an expression of gratitude that is immediately after a project is completed comes from a peer. I'll add in there a manager and a leader too, right? But comes from a peer or a manager, is tangible, unexpected, personal, and public, has the largest effect on organizational trust. So I want to just repeat that last part again, right? The frequent and consistent rewards, recognition, expression of gratitude has the largest effect on organizational trust. So if you're trying to build an organization that has high trust, that has strong relationships, that feels connected, gratitude is the one behavior that can change your entire culture to do this. And there's lots of more research that I'm going to show you to help support this, right? So we've established gratitude, largest contributor building trust. We know that trust is the single largest contributor to performance of any team. I see this over and over and over in the workplace. The best high performing functioning teams will always score very, very high on trust. You go into the sport domain. Similarly, the teams that win championships aren't always the very best. They don't always have the very best roster. They don't always have the best players. In fact, if you look back at the most recent NBA championship, I'm a basketball fan, right? So the most recent NBA championship, we saw arguably some of the best teams, some of them don't even make the playoffs, and some of them don't go very far. The teams that on paper look like they have the very best roster. Well, what usually happens is they don't have high trust on their team. They don't have what in the sport world we call chemistry. And typically the team that wins the championship is the team that can demonstrate or has that high trust. So I'll share this one data point from with you here. A great study came from Willis Towers Watson, where they measured trust inside of an organization, and then they tracked shareholder returns, right? So these were publicly traded companies that they were able to track how their stock performance trended, right? And they found some really fascinating things. Organizations that have really, really high trust saw significantly higher returns to the shareholders, significantly higher outcomes to the business. So I want to sort of just highlight that. I also want to demonstrate, I want to share, if you're not exhausted with all the data that I've already shared with you, here's more data. More energy, increased productivity, more engagement, higher satisfaction, reductions in stress, less fewer sick days, less burnout. So high trust leads to less burnout. So I want to sort of wrap it up with this statement. Gratitude builds trust. Trust elicits or evokes performance. Performance then drives outcomes inside of your business. So if you want to get better outcomes, let's go all the way to the one behavior that checks a lot of those motivational boxes, those motivational pursuit boxes. Gratitude builds trust, elicits performance, and drives outcomes. So I just sort of want to hammer that home here. I want to share just one. Whenever I present, I get into this conversation all the time. The question comes up: hey, does this influence mental health? Short answer is yes. The longer answer is reverting back to that neuroscience conversation, right? As the positive neurochemicals flow through the brain, they act as an antidote to the negative neurochemicals, most commonly known cortisol, right? The negative neurochemicals, and that causes us to have better and stronger mental health, right? Is it the end all be all? The answer is no. There's definitely other resources and other things that contribute to the negative side of our mental health that we need help or resources with. But certainly, if you're an organization and you're wanting to promote, one, better performance and better outcomes, but two, a healthier work environment for your people to come and be a part of, sharing gratitude and connecting your people is the absolute simplest, cost-effective, best way to do that. If you can flood that through your organization, and it will have massive impacts. We did, as part of some of the same research we did with one poll, we found that 3 out of 4 people told us that their mental health would likely improve if they received more appreciation and more recognition, right? So if they experienced that gratitude and appreciation event more often, that would have a positive effect on their mental health. So my last poll question here: are you guys doing enough? Is your organization, do you think your company is doing enough for employee mental health? A, if the answer is yes. B, if the answer is not even close. C, if you're sort of in between, right? Kind of hard to tell. We're doing some things, we're not doing, but we're definitely not there yet. So as we let some of the numbers come in here, what's really interesting is that this conversation is becoming a more predominant and global conversation, and it's impacting, you rewind kind of 10, 20, 30 years ago, and you would have the prevailing thought would be mental health is something you do outside of work. That's something that you don't do here at work, right? But we're finding more and more as we're getting more and more comfortable talking about it, exploring it, understanding it, it's coming more and more into the workplace, right? And definitely the workplace can be a place where you can help people be happier, help people have better mental health. Some of the organizations, I see a couple of responses that have come through. 7% said, yes, we're doing enough. The good news is you're probably the bleeding edge. You're probably the leaders in this, in some of these initiatives. If you're in the no, not even close camp, we got some work to do, right? We got to start to deploy some programs or some initiatives or some things to try and help there. And then it's good to see about half of you are kind of in this, it's hard to tell, in between space. We're doing something, maybe not everything, but what is fun to watch whenever I ask this question is we are trending in the right direction. Companies are doing more and more in terms of helping their employees be happier here. So let me sort of wrap up with this. And then I'll share two more thoughts, right? So maybe that's not a full wrap up, but communities, the evidence is the communities that express gratitude frequently see increases in satisfaction, increases in productivity, increases in engagement and happiness, right? The gratitude, you could say the gratitude is the glue that connects us together, right? It helps us feel like we are bonded together, right? So I wanted to share that thought with you. And then I want to tie this back to, because I haven't forgot about the Olympic research that we did, right? So one of the funnest, largest findings that we found as we interviewed these athletes and interviewed their coaches and then interviewed them together, one of the things we found was that, one, they had built strong relationships of trust between each other. And how that got built was on the foundation of frequent and consistent expressions of gratitude. Really, anytime training was done, anytime, one did something for another, and then additionally, anytime an achievement was won, right? So anytime there was a celebration of achievement together, all of this contributed to them winning. To then winning the Olympic medals, right? It was really interesting. I remember, I won't say his name, but he was formerly a world record holder, held the title of best athlete in the world. And typically in the track and field world, that is the winner of the decathlon and their coaches. So without saying a name, if you go back a couple of years and look at who won the decathlon in 2012, you'll now know who I'm talking about. But when we asked them these questions and we said, hey, we showed a picture of the athlete and the coach showing them embracing. And one was wearing an American flag and they just won the gold medal and they were embracing. And we showed them that picture. We said, what is happening here? And both of them immediately said, oh, we are expressing gratitude. This was a moment where an achievement was accomplished, where the two parties just sort of embraced and shared gratitude for each other, which I just thought that was a really, really powerful experience and moment to see, right? But so now that we're all experts in Motivation 101 and the neuroscience in motivation, I want to just walk through a couple of things. Gratitude checks the box with mastery. Anytime you say gratitude, you share gratitude for someone who has completed a task or demonstrated a skill or competency, you're checking that motivation box. Anytime you express gratitude, you're building the relationships, right? You're checking that motivation box. Anytime you express gratitude for a project completed or an achievement, you're checking that motivational box. And then without question, anytime we both give gratitude and receive gratitude, a flood of positive emotions happens inside of us, right? So I just wanted to highlight that gratitude is a tool that checks a lot of boxes. And so as organizations, we have an awesome opportunity here to align our people initiatives and everything we're trying to do with building culture with core motivators. And if we can do that and do that well, the data tells us that people will stay longer at our company. They'll be more engaged. They'll be more productive. And so that's the goal, right? We need to align our people initiatives with our core motivators, and gratitude is the tool that can really, really help us to do that. So with that, I'll wrap up. And Carly, I think we have a few minutes here to take a couple of questions that I will sort of let you lead the way on.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Bobby. That was a fantastic presentation. We do have one last poll up as well, so feel free to take that. And yeah, we do. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. And then I'll also kind of start us off with one. So we often get that, Bobby, you talked about how important peer-to-peer appreciation is because it needs to be consistent and ongoing. But there's also that poll result about how the executive appreciation matters the most. But of course, we all know our executive team can't appreciate every person as consistent as our peers. So when kind of shifting to that peer-to-peer model, how do you get executives to look past a top-down approach when it comes to recognition or once a year or quarterly MVP awards?
Yeah. So here's, I'll use a good analogy. And actually I've been thinking a lot about a potential good analogy here to describe all of this. But so some of you may have heard the jar and filling that jar with sand and rocks and boulders, right? So I'll sort of describe, if you want to fill your jar, and that jar is motivation or happiness, right? The executives will represent sort of the large boulders of appreciation. They come in, they're pretty impactful. The manager are then the smaller rocks, but really what fills the whole glass is all of the sand that goes in and fills the cracks, right? And that's the kind of the piece that then fills out all of the motivation. So really, it's not, so Carly, as you asked the question, it's not doing, the top down stuff. Those ones matter too, but it's building an initiative where the teams can sort of democratize gratitude, right? Where the teams can come in and share gratitude frequently, because that's actually going to go in and fill in all the little cracks and represent kind of the most of the motivation that comes from gratitude. So that's kind of an analogy of how I like to think about it. But certainly that peer-to-peer level of gratitude is really, really powerful and influential there.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's a fantastic answer. And this is kind of a follow-up answer from Leslie about that. So first off, she says also presentation. I agree. And then she also asks, how do we express how important this is without execs thinking it is too much of a soft skill? Good one. Good one.
Yeah, that one's tough. And thanks, Leslie. So one, share all the data you can, right? Share how this impacts productivity, tie it to performance, share how this benefits financial outcomes, right? Show how this benefits financial outcomes. But one thing I tell leaders is you can't just see this as a soft skill. You have to see this as a motivating influence, right? So there's other things that motivate us too. And a lot of leaders believe that your paycheck, right, should be a motivator. And it is to an extent, right? It is a motivator. But as soon as leadership teams can kind of switch their mindset and not see this as a soft skill, but as a motivator, that this is an actual behavior that will motivate your employees to work harder and work more and be more productive, then you'll be able to kind of catch the leadership team and bring them along, right?
I love that. Thank you so much, Bobby. Okay, that is all the questions we have right now. Again, if there are any more questions that pop up, feel free. You have Bobby's information. Feel free to reach out to him there. Reach out to Motivosity as well. We love being thought leaderships within this employee engagement and gratitude section or industry. And for those of you who don't know Motivosity, we are a software that focuses on building a culture of gratitude and connectedness with teams of all sizes. And we do that by giving and setting up peer-to-peer appreciation and putting the power of a thank you into the employee's hands. So thank you so much for joining us all. Our next in-house webinar is September 29th with our CEO, Scott Johnson. And look in your inbox for an invite to that coming soon. Again, thank you, Bobby. Thank you all to our guests who were here. We appreciate it. And we all hope you have a very happy Thursday.